You're at a wooden table with the orange glow of candlelight covering all that is visible. Like a creaking door, a pair of eyes slowly open across from you in a dark room. An inhuman noise emanates from it when it speaks, yet you understand the meaning all the same. It teaches you the card game you're here to play. How to summon through sacrifice, how to attack the opponent. Gold teeth weigh down the scale once hit, 1 tooth per point of damage. A grotesque hand emerges from the void to press down the scale to portray what a win looks like, before it retreats once more. It rolls out a map and places a figurine on it for you to control and allows you to see upcoming confrontation and events in its little game. During this, you're treated to the most atmospheric music you've ever heard, or at least, that I've heard. Look at me play this game in complete silence. That is what this game is all about to me. It's a work of art, and I mean that with full respect to the word. I was intrigued and cautious of this scene, but once I had gotten used to it, I felt truly peaceful. Certain pieces of music draw out my emotions very strongly, and the theme of this cabin definitely hits something in my brain like dental tools scratching teeth. It's lovely. Same goes for the cabin itself. Once you start your second life, you're asked to get a figurine off the shelf and are even encouraged to stand to keep your blood flowing. Yes, it's an escape room. Yes, the game is meant to incite curiosity in you to solve puzzles and figure out the mystery of it all, but this place is much more than a vehicle for gameplay. I love this cabin as a physical space in the game. Something about it feels incredibly comforting once the fear of the unknown fades. The beautifully rustic wood textures assuredly played a hand in my feeling this way. The choice to only illuminate everything with candlelight adds to the coziness for me as well. The puzzles aren't the only mystery in the game. There's a white flashing behind the only cabin door in the game, which you can see every time you wish to look at the door. The cabin also satiates my slightism, to just walk around and touch everything. They're so well rendered in this art style too. I feel like I know exactly what everything feels like, what a texture is supposed to do. It's crazy how standout this game feels in comparison to even AAA games in that regard. It might be a bit unfair of an advantage though, because the low lighting plays a hand in it, and also the fact that they have very few 3D environments. One of the greatest strengths of the game is the ability to draw you in with its excellent visuals, music, and dialogue. When it wants to. I'll get to that weird point later during spoilers. For now, I want to talk about how Inscryption masterfully trains you to destroy it. You add your first few cards to the deck, you learn some new abilities and apply what you know, one new card at a time. The rate that Inscryption asks you to pick up on new mechanics is also very leisurely, which adds to the madness later on. Things start out pretty tame. Stinky lowers attack by 1, poison kills in 1 hit, infinitely sacrificial cards allow you to bypass the central mechanic of sacrificing something, so that immediately seems broken in new players, but it's all understandable. It's all within reason. Eventually you understand that certain sigils have strange interactions. Certain cards have very niche uses. Dozens, maybe hundreds of situations can occur that allow you to end a fight in the first turn. This card can become infinitely and permanently stronger across runs. This card allows you to plug cards right out of your deck whenever you take that expensive ability and put it on a seemingly tame card. This dumb shit lizard becomes one of your most powerful cards when you do that. You could walk right into a totem that turns your squirrels into infinitely respawning cards that'll provide you a limitless supply of blood and bones to summon anything you want, freeing you up to fill your deck with high-priced cards. If you think you can do it, you can. If you get too good at the game before you're allowed to soak in the story or the new rules, the devil will just say fuck it and blatantly cheat in front of you. Fuck are you gonna do about it, huh? Pussy! You are breaking the game at this point. You also need to get this wild with your deck because the bosses don't just throw powerful cards at you. They have mechanics that you need to learn and adapt to. It may seem like cheating at first because of how easy it is to misplay when facing new mechanics, but you have to cheat back. I promise you, you have the means to do it too. By limiting the player's options to a few cards at every opportunity, it gives time to ruminate on new abilities. With how few cards you're allowed to have, it's very likely that you'll stumble onto weird strategies, try them out, and even succeed with them. If you have a weird plan, there's a good chance you can play it right. The game's visuals reflect the gameplay's increasingly chaotic nature too. More visual glitches will take place, some of your cards will change appearance. Why does that goat have sparkly eyes? Oh, it's because I carved out my eye with a knife and replaced it with a goat eye, and now my character thinks the goat is sexy. They done squarified my stoat.
Damn.
Stink bug has
What
made
the
its
fuck?
way in.
Why you look like that, blockhead?
Motherfucker blockhead.
Fuck you looking like that for?
Blockhead. Give me that wolf.
Nice going there, blockhead. Yeah.
Give me that knife. I'm gonna kill you with it.
It's like the more you exploit the game's mechanics, the more the entire game physically breaks down, as physical as ones and zeros can be. This is where spoilers get heavy. If you want to bow out now, sorry, but it's really hard not to spoil a game that is all about mysteries. Now, for the rest of you, let's continue. Actually facing the demon, which you might find out by now is named Leshy, in a final confrontation is a magical experience that breaks rules like other large encounters in the game. This one differentiates from those by being the most bullshit, either for you or for Leshy. It breaks the rules of standard play, it breaks the rule of keeping you in the cabin by placing you outside as if you were a piece on the map board. It breaks the rule that you can never see Leshy. He gives himself an extra life, he plays rare cards, he plays player cards, one card takes up the whole board with his own special effects. Once again though, you can cheat back, you can get boons that let you choose your card, draw twice, start with 8 bones, really powerful stuff. You can get 2 boons if you're lucky. To get to this point, you probably have something really powerful or complete bullshit. You still get the first turn though, so you can just flatten him right out the gate if your deck is good enough. The game makes barely any sense here, and it is beautiful for it. After our impressive win, Leshy congratulates us by serving us a 5-star meal, but what?
I think I just beat him! Oh.
What? What is happening? Who the fuck is this twink?
Hey there, card gamers. I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is another pack opening video. Today, I am opening Catch Monsters packs and digging for that epic, shiny Transcend Dog!
Oh, you looking for a Transcend Dog? Yeah. Good luck. Been there, brother.
Okay.
Been there.
Our first rare is a Birchkin.
Bro thought he could get a Transcend Dog off the rip. Hey. Nah, motherfucker. Right. Nah, you gotta work really good, bro.
Next pack. These are feeling good in my hands. Okay.
I wish he'd feel me in his hands.
Would you raw dog him? So this is Luke Carter, the Lucky Carter on YouTube. He found some coordinates on an old pack of Inscryption cards, which is apparently a card game in this world. He then feels compelled to actually go out and find it because it's relatively nearby. He digs it up and, yeah, dude. Wow, we're really fucking doing this. It's a video game creepypasta kind of story, but actually implemented into a pretty high quality video game. What happened earlier is he dropped the camera he was using to record, and we saw the boot up screen of that camera. It's a liberty that we the players have to just explore this footage at our leisure for context. The acting was a bit weird for me, I'm sorry, I hate saying that. I'm sure the character was meant to be a bit strange anyway. What threw me off the most was just those soulless eyes in his card opening recordings. Show a little enthusiasm, Bo. This is like the one time I would like authorize the YouTube voice, you know what I mean? Hey, what's going on, guys? We're gonna be over the... It's a super bold move to do this, to recontextualize everything you've done so far and frame it as watching someone else's story. But you know, I liked it when we were just in the cabin and I was being held captive, even if the game started to glitch up. I assumed the meta aspects of the game was going to involve me specifically, but now we're one step removed. Something feels way less personal about it. To summarize, you are playing a player playing a video game. It's weird. Let's get back to the cabin. I like that place. Leshy's a little hurt that you didn't like the hamburger helper, extra hamburger hold the helper he prepared for you, but he tries not to make you feel rude and, tries to kill you like normal. He goes to take your picture and put it on the fridge because you've been such a good noodle, but the silly Billy forgot the camera in there again. Only this time you have the film. So you're supposed to plug it in, panic, and take a picture. It's supposed to be really scary when Leshy is trying to take it back from you because Leshy's hand has been kind of a green, wrinkly vehicle of death this entire game, but you can actually just stay there for a while and Leshy's hand just shakes over the lens trying to vibrate you to death like a bumblebee. You trap him in the card. And looking to your right, you can see what's been flickering this entire time. I didn't mention this before because a few hours of gameplay doesn't have the same effect of a little YouTube video, but when you boot up the game for the first time, you can't start a new game. It's dimmed out. You have to press continue. This glowing relic is the new game button. Collecting it gives you the option to finally make that new game. Doing so begins what the game retroactively refers to as Act 2. You get a startup animation with graphics reminiscent of the SNES era. You finally see the cards and their true forms. The Stoat was PO3, the scribe of tech, Magnificus the stunted wolf, the scribe of magic, Grimora the stink beetle, the scribe of the dead. Finally, the one who turned them into cards and controlled the game before, Leshy, the scribe of beasts. The graphics have changed, but the basic mechanics carry over from Act 1, like how damage works. The music is obviously way different, switching from mainly strings to give off a horror vibe during encounters and relaxing contemplative moments in between, switching to still eerie 8-bit soundtracks and sound effects. I guess it reminds me of Game Boy Advance sound effects, but in a way that more modern entities are replicating in pixelated games to sound way more palatable. Whatever it is, I fucking love it. Keep it up, devs. It's extra crunchy, but it don't hurt your ears. Gameplay is really different, but similar. I mentioned how the most basic mechanics of winning and dealing damage are the same, but it is now revealed that you have been playing with about 1.2 of the 4 total card packs of the game. PO3's machine cards generate a new energy cell every turn, constantly and permanently expanding your resource pool. It is a very safe and understandable deck. If you've played Hearthstone like once, you know how this deck works. Magnificus's cards are the most unique. Don't pick them because they suck. They rely on having different cards out and synergy with multiple cards in the deck, but it overcomplicates it for my taste. Pick this one if you want to shake shit up the most. Grimora's deck really slows down the game. You now have to use bones as a resource, which is generated from dying allied cards. Your basic free resource cards are now skeletons, which die a turn after you use them. Now you have to be more careful about whether or not it's the right time to play resource cards. The basic version of this deck is built around stalling until you get your actually good cards, like Bone Heap, to pull off one gigantic chunk of damage with what you've been building up. You might have to sacrifice those awesome feeling moments just to chip away at opponents if it doesn't work out right. Still, it makes me feel smart for doing one thing or the other. Can you tell I like this deck the most? Pick this deck to slow the game down. Finally, Leshy's deck, the old reliable. Pick it if you don't give a single fart about any of that. All these cards are at their max potential when you figure out a way to use them together. It's incredible how the game can introduce 2 different resource types and 3 brand new styles of play, and give you the time to make a busted ass deck if you can use the little knowledge that you get card by card. It's a little less easy of an act to exploit, but there are still ways. Most blatantly is the Ouroboros, the ancient symbol meant to represent the cycle of life and death.
So if this card dies, it comes back to your hand, and it gets 1 extra point of damage and health, and you can use it again, and it'll stay that way permanently. It's really good.
So all of these characters have their own tendencies, which are shown off by the NPCs of the game. PO3 is cruel to his workers, he's arrogant and only cares about card mechanics. Magnificus is indifferent to the suffering he puts on his pupils, with a self-righteous attitude towards others. Grimora holds a deep respect for the dead and the concept of death. Her ghouls serve her, but maintain their own personalities. She is the most polite of them all. Leshy is, funny enough, the most caring of the NPCs, which only serve him out of his own interest. They feel more like his neighbors. They serve him, but they all maintain their autonomy and priorities. These were also characters that he wore masks for during his time as a game master. Later on, it's revealed that it wasn't Leshy in charge of those segments. When he put on those masks, the characters really did take over that segment. He paid homage and implemented them into his version of the game. With all these characters being in a video game, they all love playing card games with the player. What Leshy did is a huge sign of love for them. As weird as the story gets, one thing remains consistent. Everyone loves playing cards. Except Rebecca, she's on break. It adds a good bit of depth and asks us to think back on lines from Act 1. We recontextualize everything they've said and deduce possible motives, relationships, intentions, and limitations. It makes a replay massively interesting in that aspect. Be honest though, I kinda wish that they were just people and cards. Sorry, right, so, how did that even happen in the first place? How did the cabin even get created, and how did Leshy turn the game into what we found it as? Also, Act 2 tells us a little more about Luke through his recordings. He's been visited by a GameFuna representative because he sent them an email asking about the game. She gets really in his personal space, and Luke is obviously really shaken by this.
The Chad foot in the door.
Collecting the requisite cards and coming back creates a key with no immediate use for it.
It's 3D, which collides with the current art style. These cards are also pretty strong for their respective decks. The Bone Lord lays in a coffin beneath Gramora's crypt. He wants a little treat, and you don't have one. This is more obtuse. I didn't find this one on my first time through because I didn't collect the necessary cards to even notice what I needed to do. There is a card called the Obol. There are right and left facing variants. They are so weak that it wouldn't be practical to want to put them in your deck and in a fight. So you really have to pay attention to notice this if you even get these cards in the first place, which I didn't. You play them both at the same time, which is most easily done at a dummy fight that you reach later on in Magnificus's Tower. When you do, they form an ancient Obol. Take this to the Bone Lord and a secret path will open. Stepping under the ribcage of a giant with tattered clothes and a card in their pocket, you meet and talk to the Bone Lord, who speaks of data found on the disc known as the Old Data, written as old_data, all caps. He says that it's powerful, it generates images unknowable. Whatever the Old Data is, it has a mythical status in the game. The Angler also mentions something he speaks of very simply and refers to a lot of people and things as fish. The Old Data being one of those things. He says he was looking for an old_fish for Leshy. Beating PO3's factory level has his dredger find an odd piece of metal. It must have been what the Bone Lord meant by images unknowable. These are gameplay assets that most characters would never catch a glimpse of. The Bone Lord asks that you swear allegiance to the Old Data. Doing so, he gives you a rare card and a purple key, similar to the one provided by the mycologist. Again, the use is unknown as of now. By the end of Act 2, PO3 has manufactured the Old Data into a card and has you interact with it. Doing so destroys the game, mixes assets and art styles, and unfurls a chaotic scene with some really unpleasant sound design. This is tons of shit to soak in, and it's clear that even though I knew this game wasn't what it seemed when I started, the rabbit hole just keeps getting deeper. Who the fuck is this a picture of? What is on the Old Data? Where is this going to go? What does this mean for loot? It's so ambitious. I've never seen a game attempt something like this out there. But I still miss Act 1. I wonder if there'll be an endless mode after I beat the game. We are sent flying into Act 3. The tone of this act is set right at the beginning. When our eyes are finished being assaulted by the Old Data's onslaught on Luke's computer, a soft ringing echoes in the 3D art style once again. A metallic, cold room. That charming detail like done gawking? Motherfucker! PO3 cuts the trope of fanfare off immediately with that uncaring statement. It's a great show of character, and it's definitely a tone setter for the act. A lot of people don't like this act. It obviously wasn't my favorite. That would be, you know, but there is a lot of things to love alongside the main criticisms. So this game reintroduces machine cards as the base deck. The lane is expanded to 5 instead of 4 to take advantage of the fact that you have practically unlimited resources once you stall enough. It also makes for more situations you have to worry about, so you might choose places to trade more often in order to stall enemy phases with lots of card placements. Actually getting cards is permanent. A death merely takes you back to a checkpoint and takes all of your money, your over damage. You need to fight back to the last place you were before you got into a fight so you can retreat or challenge them again. Really forgiving, probably because it's really easy to mess up. Getting cards is frequent. Once or twice in between every checkpoint you can find a new card or ability. This is where it might get tricky for somebody who's not used to card games. An inexperienced player will take every card they can get, thinking more variety is always better. Someone a little better at this will just avoid some cards to keep a consistent strategy and even destroy cards once they've honed their strategy even further. Sometimes you trade a card for resources, you trade a card for another card, you can upgrade them to permanently stay dead after they fall in battle. That one's called supercharging, and I see it misused a lot during a first playthrough. Because people think like, obviously I want this on my strongest card, it gets more damage. The most winningest strategy in any card game is to make sure that every card you draw is good. You can do this with destroying cards you don't want and upgrading weaker, lower cost cards with great sigils. If you save up the money to buy this random item in a shop, you can even get your old reliable Ouroboros once again if you're just tired of trying. Or just cheat and enter 5 once the clock appears. Dude, there should be an achievement for destroying Ouroboros called like Broken Cycle or something. That'd be so sick. It's super easy to make your deck frog shit early on, which is just a shame because the learning curve drops off heavy once you get some specific tools after the first 2 bosses, like creating your own cards, Ouroboros if you can find it, and abusing the empty cell power-ups. There are ways to break this act, but it relies on a good amount of attention and patience. On the topic of cards, while I was writing, I realized that the first act focuses on blood and bone, while the third act focuses on tech and magic. I just thought that was interesting. I didn't really think of that first ever played. Visually, it's a little hard to look at this act. The constant bright blue is a bit nauseating for me. A lot of work was gone into actually making the cards look fantastic as floppy disks. The bit where PO3 has machines you can plug cards into, the dark and metal abandoned factory you find yourself in, it's atmospheric if it wants to be, but PO3 refuses to let you slip back into the comfort of being a character. Luke also chimes in every now and again, further reminding you of your place as an outsider. A third party, I mean. PO3 refuses to tell a story, and I hate him for it. It's very representative of a take on game design. He sours a big part of the comfort of Act 1 and makes me view the game with a lot less satisfaction in my actions. My favorite parts of this act is when he just went away, letting other characters inside his files to take over boss encounters. This is the only time I felt like anything that the game had thrown at me really matched what I felt in the first act with bosses like the Miner, the Angler, the Trapper, and Leshy. The characters weren't warped in layers of irony with a cynical view of their own presentation. They were genuine. So the structure is like Act 2, where you gotta fight 4 bosses, 4 Uberbots to beat it. These bosses, because PO3 is uncreative or just uncaring, are all based off the 4 scribes. Leshy's boss is unfeeling, and it only concerns itself with taking pictures. You can use these screenshots to revert the board state. Interesting, but very easy. Grimora's stand-in is the Archivist. She wants to record and categorize everything. Her mechanic is once you kill one of her follower cards, you can use your real files based on age or size to weigh down the scale for a maximum of 4. Magnificus's boss allows you to make up rules from a limited selection, which just creates chaos. PO3's boss is Golly, the easiest one. She plays cards with real pictures of animals and even your friends off your friends list. I say she's the easiest because there's a good chance that you just skip your second phase entirely. She actually plays some tough cards in the first phase, but it doesn't matter. You should be broken by now. There's even a super cool secret boss that has a really momentous feeling to it. To the right, on the map of Botopia, where the Archivist and the Photographer's path intersect, there is a secret arrow that points away from the map. PO3 had no idea this was in the game and acts accordingly. A locked door appears, where you can use that key from the Mycologist in Act 2. Entering it has the Mycologist take over PO3. The area sprouts mushrooms. These unhinged live-action characters are displayed on PO3's monitor. It is psychotic. It's also really hard if you don't have an unfair strat. It is an incredible reward for players that pay attention to detail and made it here. I found this naturally on my first playthrough, which was amazing. I was doing Scooby-Doo on him. God damn. Remember the key that you got from the Bone Lord? This one is a bit more obtuse. It's not that it's hard to find in Act 3, it's just that people who would find the key in Act 2 are way more likely to participate in the ARG, which is good because it leads into the ARG. I ain't gonna talk about it. I will never participate in an ARG. That is for Team Fortress 2 players. I shouldn't have to explain the satisfaction of solving a puzzle or finding a secret, just know that this game does it well, and when I found the Mycologist, I finally scratched that itch that the escape room puzzle placed on me in Act 1. God, I miss that cabin. Like Act 2, a little more Luke is shown off to us. We get a few files that start appearing in the world and reflect Luke as a person, mostly his upbringing, what got him into cards and YouTube. There's also a recording showing Luke just going insane over Inscryption. He's going insane over every detail, trying to figure out what the fuck the Finishing off the content of Act 3 leads you to enacting the Great Transcendence. PO3's been saying this the entire time you've been together, but never elaborates. On the way to the end of the game, PO3 reminisces about it and even shows a bit of care for the player. He's proud of what he's made and secretly happy that he got to share it with somebody, even if he only feels it a little. It's humanizing for somebody who's been so cold the entire game. Once you make it, he starts to gloat. How he's tricked you, Luke, into giving access to your hard drive with the Archivist. He took screenshots with the Photographer boss, he had you finish off the boss of the Painter, he even got access to the internet with Golly. He wants to upload the game to the whole world to multiply himself in the name of self-preservation, which would have been catastrophic because of the malicious data on the disk. While he's processing everything and getting distracted, Leshy grabs his head and rips it clean off. This is fucking hilarious that he did this right after PO3 showed some sentimentality. All of the scribes are here, presumably to reset the game once again so that one of them can take control. Grimoire picks up the folder held by the Archivist during her boss fight and deletes Inscryption with it. Grimoire views this as an end to suffering, quarrels, and a time to finally rest. She is the scribe of the dead, after all. The most important thing to her was to delete the old data along with Inscryption. The clickety-clack of the game processing what happens begins and the screen fades to black. Holy shit, what a twist. I had no idea where the story was going to go, and for all of it to just suddenly say, yeah, this world and all these characters are about to stop existing is shocking. The mechanics of this act were a little one-dimensional with how it consisted of stalling with lower value cards to get greater cards. It was fun taking advantage of what they gave you though. It's a little easier to break this section than Act 2, but it was a bit strange to lock that behind progressing 50% of the way. The more I got through it, the less I used my head. It makes sense for the story, but it's a little less engaging, don't you think? You load into a dark stone room with a tombstone in front of you. Placing a name in the stone reveals Grimora waiting at a stone table for you. She talks of celebrating her long life and warns you of the evil on the disc while you play a few rounds of Inscryption, this time with her bone-themed deck. This is fascinating to me. It teases an entirely new art style to play just to say, yeah, we could have made a whole new environment with new puzzles and card mechanics, but we're not gonna! It's a huge flex that serves to broaden the scope of the game in your mind. That there was loads and loads of content to potentially play, but you'll never see it. It makes you want it way more. A spider. Oh. What have I done? She even thinks you're about to enter a boss battle, but... it gets cut off right in front of you. She wishes you could have played a bit more, but accepts that this is the end. She warns you and shakes your hand and ceases to exist. The game loads once more into Leshy's cabin. He lays there waiting for deletion, but is surprised to see you there. He doesn't seem distraught. He wants to live to play more, but he accepts his death just as Grimora. All he wants to do is play games. The guitar begins, and with a rush of memory of Act 1 flowing through my little noggin, I see that everything that Leshy had done to antagonize me in the first act was all for the sake of a player experience, all to create the best game he could. He's an artist, in the truest sense of the word, and loves nothing more than his work. It's really easy to empathize with him once you're back at the table with him. He's no longer a monster, but an old friend on his deathbed. The cards you use in your last match with him is from the last game that you played with him before. He saved them. He compliments your cards. He laughs when you destroy one of his own. The facade of a demonic killer is gone. He is now his true self, an old man who loves telling stories and playing games. He's loving every second with you. Once either of you make it to 5 damage points, the scale just disappears. He shrugs off the departure of the scale and continues to play your game. It's enough to make me cry. After a few rounds, the bell disappears. Everything disappears around you. He warns you of the old data before his time comes and reaches to shake your hand before disappearing forever. The game loads into a white void. Magnificus is waiting for you at the end. He admonishes you for your decisions. He asks to be spared by ejecting the disc, but he knows that won't happen. You rise on Pillar, and he equips you with an obvious reference before you begin fighting with the magic deck.
I summon Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional cards from my deck!
That's not what it does.
Roll my dice! That is what it does. Pot of Greed! Draw 3. I summon Pot of Greed to draw 3 additional cards.
Because of the crumbling world, assets go missing as the match goes on. The camera circles around to show you the illusion of a player's presence, just to be hands being rendered. He sets a maximum health of 400, probably in an attempt to lock himself in an impossibly long match, but it doesn't matter. The card mechanics are a far cry from Act 2's magic cards to represent how little there is left. Also so the developers don't have to model 100 magic cards for a 10-minute segment. He falls to the ground, reaching to shake your hand, only to stop moving before disappearing. Nothing but white remains. You walk around with your pixelated avatar from Act 2 and meet the woodcarver who gives you one final warning to not touch the old data. Obviously, Luke ignores this. A flood of information hits the screen, barely any of it showing up on camera, and Luke deems it fit to destroy it with a hammer. It doesn't matter, it doesn't break. The scene cuts to Luke calling someone to report the information he found on Inscryption, but he hears a knock at the door. Answering the door, he gets shot in the head on sight. The same thing that happens to people who steal one Nintendo game. The Game Funa rep walks over his dead body, presumably to collect Inscryption, and the credits roll. A round of applause, everyone. An incredible, ambitious, experimental, and unforgettable experience created by a stupidly talented team and headed by one of the most creative minds in the gaming scene. People have created meta-narratives before, but never something so bold, paired with such high quality. I can't shower this game with enough praise for what they've accomplished. But I still liked Act 1 more. I'm sorry! I liked the game best when it was just you in a cabin with some crazy demon. That was my favorite part. It might not have been the most interesting. Inscryption goes to insane lengths throughout its duration. The only problem is Act 1 was literally perfect. I keep using that word because I wholeheartedly believe it. When the game was just Act 1, I thought I had found one of my new favorite games. This expectation and security given to me by the game was pulled out from under me, and I was presented with a fascinating experience that I simply didn't like as much. Comparing the visuals of every act is pretty open and shut, but I'd like to talk about the mechanics, their shortcomings, and what they accomplish. Act 1, you know how I feel. Perfect. The game drip feeds you what you needed to know to absolutely destroy the game. In the beginning, you fumble as you learn, but that climb in knowledge takes you to unending heights. If it didn't end, I was excited to go through it and see how many different ways I could break it, but I understand that they wanted to cut it off before people got tired of winning so much. And endless mode didn't exist yet either. Act 2's gameplay definitely gave the most opportunity for strategy just from the volume of cards. I know people who fucking hated the game from this point, most likely because they're comparing it to Act 1 like me. Looking at it with its own merits though, it's unbelievable the number of cards that they introduce and even allow to intermingle with one another. Also, how you have to collect cards randomly in packs so you're consistently looking for new ways to get foils until you basically find a foil spawner in the tower. What was kinda lame is I never really felt like a payoff of getting insanely powerful in that mode. Once I developed a good strategy, not even counting Ouroboros, I didn't feel like I had enough opportunities to feel the power I created by paying attention. Overall, I actually liked it. Unfortunately, it's a really easy act that you can just brute force if you never take a moment to think, which is bad practice for Act 3, but it does reward those who think critically and experiment. Act 3 provides tons of opportunities for new cards that you shouldn't always take. There are lots of different ways to modify and permanently alter your deck like in Act 2, but mixed with the drip-fed info stylings of Act 1. It should be a marriage of the two styles, but it ends up feeling really cluttered just for very little to change in its life cycle. The main strategy will always be to stall until you get your good cards and then you have full energy. I guess you could say there was a similar style in 1 and 2 with how you need to wait for resources to summon, but they give you lots of different ways to do new and creative things in turn 1. Act 1 provides limited opportunities for you to find and create openings by not giving you an excessive amount of options, and Act 2 gives you unlimited access to cards in order to create a special path to victory with no outside help. Act 3 does a bit of both, but come on, you're really not going to get energy cell sigil on your vessels? Are you really not going to pick up the present, gemify it, and then put unkillable on it? Are you really not going to make a brittle card that you can infinitely play at 0 cost in order to get infinite cards or energy cells the same turn that you get that card in your hand? The answers just felt a little too obvious. I was just going through the motions in Act 3, barely thinking. I might have misrepresented a few things because obviously there were some great moments and I'm oversimplifying it for the sake of a video, but that's the feeling I had, and I think that's worth considering. Now there is another mode after you complete the game, a modified version of Act 1 called Casey's Mod. I guess you can refer to this as Act 0. Daniel Mullins made it as a thank you for the incredible support for Inscryption, as this was his biggest commercial success yet. In it, we take the role of Casey, a designer that worked at Game Funa who buried Inscryption in the woods and died in a fire. Actually, she was killed by Game Funa for taking the game Inscryption home to study and work on it, because she was fascinated by the game somehow morphing into what we see in Act 1 with 3D environments and dialogue they've never written. She learns about the old data, which sealed her fate. She was well respected for the time she spent with the characters and for her hand in creating them. She is immortalized in an NPC in Grimoire's Crypt, PO3's Botopia, and even a card in Leshy's deck. The gameplay is pretty much exactly what I wanted out of Act 1. I think I'm fucked. I think I take the L. I think I just lose. He's got the bear wall, man. The bear wall. The square hole. Okay, that gives me 4 damage. With the scissors and all that. Wait. Oh, wait a minute. I just need 5 damage to win. If I get 2 more bones, I think I'm set. I think I'm fucking good. So, look, we take the goat. Right? Yeah. Yeah. We take the goat, we summon the moose, and now I have 5 damage, and now I use the scissors, and now I get past the bear wall! Please? Oh! I still went back and played most of the content though. I'm probably gonna 100% it one day, maybe on a stream, if I actually get a good setup for that. My PC isn't really shit. A lot of easily exploitable strategies like Corpseborn Ouroboros that infinitely summons Ouroboros from your hand for free over and over no longer works. Cards that spawn from other cards like rabbits, bees, and ants no longer inherit traits that make them completely untouchable. There was a limit placed on campfires to prevent you from getting rid of cards easily. Finally, more and more challenges are added on as you go. There's even a new optional final boss, Royal the Pirate. He's the boss you never got to play against Gromora because he got zapped. It's a beautiful send-off to fans who loved his work but wanted more. Mullins made the best decision of focusing on Act 1, which is a universally loved chunk of the game. Although it is a little unfortunate we won't see fully realized version of Act 2 or 3, but I know people who don't care. So this game, if you actually want to cover everything about it, it requires a gigantic amount of research. Inscryption is actually the 3rd in a trilogy of games which work together to create an unbelievable story that most people who engage with his works will never know without the videos from insane people to document them. This video is not over. Daniel Mullins, the creator of Inscryption, also created Pony Island and The Hex. Slight spoilers ahead for both of these games. Skip to this time to skip this section. This will be the most basic summary of the connected story that you will ever hear. Let's begin.
The Carnoffel Code. Something that Luke has been researching throughout Act 2 and 3 was a powerful sequence of Carnoffel cards which are from a card game dating back to the early 15th century. The code held limitless power. The code passed through many hands, including the evil hands of the Nazis, but they were defeated before they were able to tap into its powers. A Russian diplomat became the only man left alive who knew about the Carnoffel Code, as every man who did were all put to death, as punishment for their efforts during World War II. After the war, spies were sent to secure the code that lied on Hitler's rotting corpse. This was likely the giant ribcage we see when interacting with the Bone Lord. It had tan, tattered clothing and cards in its pocket. The spies located the code and inscribed it onto a floppy disk, and even that was enough to generate the power this story revolves around. This is the old data, which apparently gained the ability to lightly influence others to never destroy it, even if it's to their best interest. Pony Island's role in this is pretty simple to explain. Lucifer is an entity that resides in a computer. He was sealed by an unknown force. He generated the game Pony Island as lines of code and got out. Yeah, he just got out of the computer. No big deal. He tricks the player through the use of empathy into completing his game. That game being a vehicle to free himself from the digital prison he finds himself in. He didn't have the power to influence his prison, but he could influence someone else to do it for him. Eventually he escapes into human form. Maybe it was the original player of Pony Island. Down the road, in the human body, he would form the company Game Funa. Eventually, Lucifer, with his intimate knowledge of the Carnoffel Code, climbed his way into possessing as much power as possible in order to get his hands on it. As a human, his power is incredibly limited. The only way to gain power as a human was through wealth. So that's exactly what he did. He generated enough wealth to create Game Funa, a video game company which was likely created as an excuse to get involved with the tech industry without generating too much attention, and also because of his familiarity with computers as lines of code. After finally securing the code, Lucifer set his company to work on creating Inscryption. It's unknown why, but I'd guess to sow as much chaos as possible, infinitely replicating the old data. That's just speculation though. Casey, an employee of Game Funa, discovered the influence of the old data on the game characters, and you know where the story goes from there. The Hex has the most obvious relations to Inscryption for even an average player like me. The Hex is about game characters who act kind of like actors, games are treated like work, what seems like a lighthearted way to tell a story about a weird cast of characters and serve as a way to talk about what happens when game properties get away from their developers, becomes another strange meta-narrative entangled in this psychotic web created by Mullins. When in transit to Lucifer, who was in America, the old data passed through a father's hands. A young boy named Lionel had a computer that was merely in the same house as the old data. It was infected and influenced by it. As the boy grew up, he had an interest in game design, so gosh darn it, that boy made a game. The game was released to the public, where Lucifer, being a video game studio president, took notice. This video game had characters that were actually alive. Lucifer sensed that this was the work of the old data, bought the rights to the game, and hired Lionel once he was working age. The old data corrupted Lionel over the years and turned him into a spiteful and bitter person. This caused developers working for him to write a sort of joke character in the game, a clown named Sato who causes constant glitches when she's around. Because of the old data's influence, this character too was alive. Sato is cruel and sadistic, as you could imagine from her name. She torments the characters of the Hex and even understands her status as being nothing more than code. Her nature, being with the intention to glitch things around her, resulted in her being able to utilize the power to manipulate games in any way she pleases. It didn't help that Lucifer really liked this character and funneled as much power into her as he could muster. Eventually, the characters in the Hex are sick of being mistreated and forgotten and build a machine that allows them to cross through worlds to kill Lionel. Big jump, I know, but this is the old data we're talking about here. It powers these characters. Their power is limitless and unknown. They cross over, kill him, and the game ends, but this also lets Sato free to roam the real world. Like Lucifer, she had come to inhabit a human body, and this human Sato inhabits is the very same enforcer that came to Luke's house for the Carnoffel code. You can see that in this single frame found at the end of the game.
And that's all we know right now. Those are the basics of everything that's tied together. Most of this information is found in the ARG created by Mullins. Just know that there are codes, ciphers, hints, puzzles, a real-life Inscryption floppy disk out there. Bunch of cool shit that I'm never going to talk about. Matt Fat from Game Theory has you if you're interested in that. This lore section in this video is going to be super sparse until I saw this video by someone named Maka_J. Phenomenal 44-minute video dense with complete summary of the entire Daniel Mullins continued meta-narrative, which I'm certain has yet to end. He also did summaries on all of the Daniel Mullins games so you can get in-depth lore on everything about these games. There's gotta be more and I can't wait for people to figure out. For me, while I just play the video game, I'll just stick with the info that I get from the surface level of the game, which you can still piece together a good story. I knew most of the basics of that. An incredible amount of work has gone into minor details in every game to tie them together. I don't know of another meta-narrative who has been working on this scale, spanning multiple games across years and years while also providing superb gaming experience from a casual perspective. Now, back to Inscryption. Criticisms on the whole game is tricky because if I say I don't like the presentation of Act 3 or the gameplay of Act 3, then someone who defends it would say, you missed the point. First of all, you're stupid. Second of all, I did understand it. I just didn't value that message as much as the first part of the game, which was like perfect, dude. I love him. Look at Leshy, he's my friend. It's fine to love this game. I'd love to hear thoughts from people who regard this as their all-time favorite game because that is a completely valid take, and I guarantee you there are people out there with that opinion. It ultimately boils down to taste. I can't definitively say if anything was good or bad. I like what I like. However, I can recognize that as a piece of art, this has impacted me on a profound level and touched many others. I wouldn't have talks for so long if I wasn't thinking about this game so much. Talks with my friends about this game usually end in one or two ways. It's either like, oh, that was the best game ever. Oh, it's like, oh, this thing, oh, it's so good. And then my other friend would be like, yeah, that game's great. Too bad it sucks. I do miss the game that never existed though and get irrationally upset when thinking about the acts that took away the game I wanted. It obviously didn't, but I'm just salty. The extended escape room and card game experiences from Act 1 that barely edge you on run after run, one that unlocks more and more puzzles the better you do in the game and over time, an hours-long mystery and roguelike. I'm convinced that Mullins' team had the talent to create one of my favorite games of all time, but they chose to create a different experience. Inscryption is one of the greatest games ever made, and I hate it. It makes me so mad. End the video.